5 p.m., time to get down to work. I will call this meeting of the Special Initiatives Committee to order. And I'll start with the Land Acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship that it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. It's nice to be back, even if it is just to say goodbye. So I'm here tonight to resign as your mayor, and want to thank the residents of Collingwood for their confidence and their support over the past 8 years, and more importantly, the past 4 years, and in particular during the pandemic. I also want to thank staff for their incredible work over that time, and the members of this council around this table. Thank you all for the support. We've worked together through some difficult times over the last 4 years, and I think we've shown what collective will can do to overcome obstacles. And I know that you will continue to do great things until the election. And then I wish all of you the best who are seeking election, both around this table and in the community. We have a very vibrant community, a very active community, and a very healthy democracy in this town. And that is in an absolute tribute to our residents who are so involved and so caring. So thank you all. It's been great, and I look forward to serving you in my new role, and I hope that I will not be a stranger in this chambers. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to the acting mayor. Now I'm in trouble.
No, you're not. You're, is this on? Mayor Saunderson, thank you. And Clerk Almas, just from a technical standpoint in a moment, I will get up and I will take over as the chair for tonight's purposes. But before you leave, I just thought I would open it to the table if there is anybody who would like to say anything. And certainly I'd like to say a word or two prior to you leaving. So why don't, so in that case, I'm just going to start at the end here. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. And thank you now, former Mayor Saunderson, for being classy enough to come in and say goodbye in person. You could have just mailed it in, and it is nice to see you, and congratulations on your move to Queen's Park. We look forward to twisting your arm in the near future.
Thank you. So, former Mayor Saunderson, Brian, I want to say what great leadership you brought, particularly, first of all, in your role as deputy mayor, and just not the leadership as a mayor, but the many initiatives that you brought to the table. And one of those just came up at FCM, and council had supported it, but with respect to truth and reconciliation and the calls to action, and just another one of the many initiatives you brought to our attention around the table and that we were able to follow through on. So I think it was leadership and initiatives and really caring about our community that made the most for us around the table. So thank you for all of that, and all the best in what you go ahead to do, because I know you can be a big help for all communities in your role that you're going to. So best with that.
I also will thank you for your leadership around this council table and in our community, and for your service to our community, because of course at any time council does play a very strong leadership and service role in our community, but I think no more than during these last 2 years for COVID. We have tackled some big files, made some very tough decisions, and it has been great to have you in the leadership role as we do this. And I also am looking forward to having you in Queen's Park and twisting your other arm when you come to council. All the very best.
Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. I remember at your victory celebration the other night when you were talking about the beginning of your political journey, and ours pretty much started with the same thing. I followed you a little bit later, and it's been an interesting ride. Thank you for everything.
As usual, I will be a little bit different from my predecessors. Thank you for your friendship, Brian. We met many years ago under different circumstances, and I appreciate everything. And not too many of you know how much levity and humor this man has. He's a very nice man, and I thank you for everything that you've done for me and my family. And I wish you and your family the best, and hopefully we can get you back for a coffee Saturday mornings again. But your friendship has been undeniable to me, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you for your service to the town and to this council. And I know you're going to bring dignity and diligence and dedication and dad jokes to Queen's Park. And I look forward to hearing all of that. Thank you.
I would like to, through you, first extend a gratitude of thanks to Susan and to your boys. It's not easy to be a public figure. It's not easy to face some of the challenges within a community that is growing at the pace that we are, and that are presented with the opportunities and the challenges that go with it. And I think that every step of the way, whether it was dealing with COVID specifically, whether it was dealing with the ICBL, whether it was dealing with the hospital, and a list of issues go on and on, the thing that I take away is that you showed up. And this will be week 2 for me. And we don't celebrate that enough. And I think that the staff recognize the hours that you put in. And in fact, a resident actually recently commented to me specifically. They asked whether or not, there was a question in the comment. The question was, what was I going to use and take the office down in the corner? And I said, well, potentially at some point I might start to use it. And then they commented that they had noticed that the lights had been turned off. And I certainly know through myself the number of times that Gracie and I have walked up and down here, Ontario, where I've walked past the office to either see you here early in the morning, midday, or well into the night, continuing to work on behalf of the community. Not only locally in terms of the things that we were facing, but at the county level, and as well as on the number of issues or opportunities that this community are now a part of as it relates to the UN Habitat Initiative, the Great Lakes, the tremendous work that you've done at the Great Lakes Committee as a representative for this community. It has been said by many that when you run for municipal politics, when you run for politics in general, you never work so hard for a job that you truly are going to get paid so few dollars. Now, I've butchered that phrase, but it doesn't matter. The reality is that you showed up. You have been a stalwart and a champion and an ambassador for this community. And as I go back to my initial comment, there has to be something said for the person who stands behind you day in, day out, because I am sure there are many a night that you left here frustrated, disappointed, as well as many times that you left here feeling good about the things that we were doing as a community. And you had a true partner and a true friend at home. And I would just like you to convey our thanks for being that stalwart, for being the rock for you and your family that afforded you the opportunity to be here as our representative, first as deputy mayor for 4 years, and now as our mayor for the majority of this term. Lastly, and I'll just leave it at this, thank you for your friendship.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor, and I will certainly take that message home to Susie and the boys, and thank you all again. Take everyone's hand, but I think I'm going to be taking up everyone's time.
Congratulations.
Wreck my exit. We got all my stuff.
Okay. Thank you for those who are with us tonight in the audience, those who are following along perhaps at home or online in whatever capacity, for taking us a few minutes to acknowledge our friend Mayor Saunderson. With that said, I'd like us to return to order for our Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for Monday, June the 6th. And I just would like to point out that Councillor Carrier has sent his regrets. The rest of us are here in person this evening, and that we're ready to carry forward. So with that said, and now after all of that, I don't think we have adopted the agenda. So if I could have a mover and a seconder that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for June the 6th, 2022 be adopted as presented. I've got Councillor Doherty, Councillor Hamlin, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Do we have any around the table this evening? Seeing none, if you run into one through the course of the meeting, you know what to do. That brings us to number 4, deputations. And we have 2 this evening. The first one being 4.1 and then 4.2. 4.1 is the Georgian Bay Accelerator implementation update from Peter Heinke and Gillian Fairley and Brian Herner on behalf of the Georgian Bay Accelerator. So, Peter, are you presenting? Okay. So, Peter, come on forward. And you've got 10 minutes, sir. And Peter, I apologize. Did I get the name?
Heinke.
Heinke.
Think of Heineken. It's close.
That I can do. So, okay. You have the floor, sir.
Great. Acting Mayor Hall, members of the council and staff and general public. Thanks for the opportunity today to present to you an overview of the Georgian Bay Accelerator and what we've been doing and what was formerly named the South Georgian Bay Technology and Innovation Center. And then also we're here today to request for our second-year funding, which was set aside under the MOU signed last September 2021. So what is an accelerator? We sort of look at it in terms of 3 segments. It's a catalyst of ideas, people, and place. And that's supported by a network of a community that we have very strong up here of business entrepreneurs and everything else that provide a lot of energy to these businesses. And these are a lot of people that, as you know, are semi-retired but still carry a lot of will to sort of be part of the community. And we're very results oriented. So we can go through all this presentation, but at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve? So my name is Peter Heinke. I'm the Interim Executive Director. I've been part of the steering committee and then a founding board of director. And I'm happy to have with me Brian Herner, who just recently joined us on the board as the appointee from Collingwood, town of Collingwood. And then Gillian Fairley, who's the chairperson and is general manager of the network here. So what do? We describe what we do in sort of 3 segments. We do programming, coaching, and mentoring. We do services. We provide access to funding or coach people to access to funding. We provide technology, and then we do networking and events. So just under each of these areas, under programming, coaching, and mentoring, the programs up here, one of the things we've been looking at is that the companies are very, very diverse up here. So it's hard in a typical accelerator model. You have a cohort comes in, they learn basic things, but the businesses here are also different. So we came up with a method where we do a deep dive. Deep dive goes through the business in detail and determines where their strengths are, weaknesses, does it like almost like a mini business plan. And then we're currently under program is evaluating different programs that University of Waterloo Accelerator runs. Laurier runs one also. They run it in conjunction with MIT. And we're looking at sort of a hybrid of the two. So sort of probably 50% programming and then 50% mentoring. The coaches are more people that we bring in that are instructional and foundational in nature. They provide a lot of teaching. They teach businesses how to fish, not do the fishing for them. The coach performs the deep dive, and then we develop for each company sort of a customized program that deals with what their needs are. And then finally, I think the real strength of the community is we have mentors. So mentors come in on a voluntary basis, and they tend to spend, we average anywhere from 2 to 4 hours with them. And these are people that are sort of have domain expertise in something, or it could be an industry, it could be functional expertise. And they've been really, really helpful so far. And a lot of them, I think, are very enthused about the opportunity. So we have about 7 volunteer mentors today. Then on the services side, we sort of looked at what sort of things come up and what sort of needs do we have. Technology, I think a lot of businesses don't understand how technology can be really used and integrated. There's been a problem with tech. I don't know if you've obviously read probably about it too, that there's a lack of tech people around. Like it's really hard to get programmers in that. We sort of looked at what's called no-code, low-code solutions and areas where we can not necessarily build a technology using it, but use technology in these businesses. And so we find that money is an accelerant, but also use of technology is an accelerant in a business. And then we also help them with access to funding. So how do you set up these businesses to be investment ready so that if they need funding, they can go out and get it? And then we're also looking at a lot of our businesses right now are export focused, so we're working with the EDC and taking a look at what programs they have. So our goal at the end of the day is to bring these businesses, if they need funding, to a point in time where they're pitch ready, is what we say. And then finally, as we said, like in the networking and events, the network up here is really, really strong. I mean, it's amazing the people that are up here when you sort of go through and understand what their backgrounds are. So we're sort of a catalyst from driving that sort of interaction between mentors, businesses, and coaches. And then we also help to access opportunities outside of this area, but more in Canada and also very heavily in the US. As part of this, in most accelerators, when we did the investigation, a lot of them, the biggest challenge at the top is really validating the market they have, and are they selecting the right market? So our first event is going to be on market selection and validation. That's this Thursday, and we have Laura Allen, who teaches entrepreneurship at Laurier, and came to me referred to from a number of mentees that have been through various programs, and always sort of said that she was probably the best person they've ever had teach them about those areas. Our goal for this year was to support at least 6 companies, and we've done that. We've provided formal and informal programming. We've provided access to funding opportunities, access to international networks and relationships, and then we've also gotten expert advice from our mentors. Our results on a high level, we've had revenue growth from 100 to 300%, and the majority of the companies that are in our accelerator. We've created about 15 jobs to date with about 6 new hires. And we have an additional, one of our companies uses offshore, so they have about additional 25 international jobs they created this year. Of the services, there's 3 that are all export into the US. 2 are assessing increasing the export, so we're looking at working with them with the EDC. We have 1 that recently joined that's and again, in exports, a SaaS-based model, very strong, will be a very big opportunity in the US, and we're assessing right now with them second round seed funding. And we have 2 that are using these technology services that we spoke about. Our operational goals at the beginning of the year, 1 was to establish a nonprofit with a board of 3 to 5. We have 4 board members. The 4th member that's not here is a fellow by the name of Ian Locke. Ian brings a lot of VC experience. He was one of the early employees at Netscape, so I think employee number 9. So he has a lot of great connections into Palo Alto and the Valley. Government funding, we've received RED grant funding, which is up to $100,000 for 50% of the expenses. And we've also applied the Jobs and Growth Fund, which we haven't received word back on yet. Historically, now this last year, we've been working a lot with Google Docs and sort of hammering something together, but we've looked at various operating systems that different accelerators use, And we just recently, just actually last week, chose Incubator Pro, which is the same software that U of W uses in there. And that's what manages the mentors, it manages time, manages all the communications between the different companies. Staffing, I'm acting as interim executive director. We just recently hired an events and education coordinator who sort of meets our philosophy of this is somebody that was born here, raised here, went to university, and wants to work here. So he's a little bit junior, but he's very enthusiastic and passionate. And then we have coaches, again, mentoring. We have about 7 expert mentors to date, but there's a lot of people that are hearing about it now, and we're getting a lot of influx for that. Programming, as I mentioned, we're looking at Waterloo's Accelerator program at Laurie's. It's mostly trying to get the programming that doesn't suit, like is outside of a cohort model. We put our website up, which has applications for mentors and companies. We don't have an operating, our estimate is, I think we're probably 250 to 300 hours, it's probably more in terms of mentoring and coaching delivered. And then we have this first event going on. Over this coming year, what things we're looking at is almost creating a sort of a merchant banking style service for our businesses where we'll help them go out and seek funding. We're also like going out to the street now for private sector funding for the accelerator. We started out in COVID, so everything was virtual. We're still operating pretty much virtual. So we're sort of assessing, do we need space or don't we need space? Do we work with like the Foundry and the different other organizations in the area? We're looking at the programming side, as I mentioned. We're expanding our pool of coaches and mentors and networking and other events. This is our original budget. We budgeted for about 600,000 of contributions last year. We got about 400. The expenses are 170. So we didn't spend as much last year. We had a bit of a transition with various executive directors, and so some of the expenses will be pushed off into this year. That brings us to the budget here for this current year. It's what we're requesting from municipality is 200,000. We have private and other money we're looking at for this coming year of 200,000. We have the RED grant, and then we have the jobs and application funding where we haven't received a notification yet whether we're going to receive that. And then we're going to expand on our programming, as I discussed, and coaching, and probably get a little bit more sector-based coaches in some areas. And so over the year, we figure that we'll have a deficit of about 169. So in total, we'll have about 148 in total at the end. So the ask for tonight is, this is directly out of our MOU, was the town agreed to set aside an additional 250, less an amount of any backstops received, and that's for this current fiscal year. And basically that's it. Should there be any questions? Thank you very much for presenting, and thanks for your support today.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate the presentation this evening. And to your 2 colleagues with you, Brian and Gillian, thank you for being with us tonight. Before I open it to the floor for questions, I'm sure that there will be Director Kenny will be bringing forward a report to council at a later date, specific to the request that's being made tonight. Okay? But I'm sure that there are questions, and if they can be fielded tonight, fantastic. And if they can't, they potentially could be incorporated in the report coming back. So are there any questions for our deputant tonight? Please, Councillor Hamlet.
Thank you so much for coming and making that presentation. I'm just so excited to hear all that you've accomplished in the past year. It is unbelievable. We are so lucky in Collingwood to have an accelerator here, and amazing. So I was hoping you could just remind us all what kind of businesses the accelerator is targeting in terms of, I understand it's not startup businesses, but can you just go over that a bit?
Well, through Mr. Mayor, I mean, one of the things that we also are a startup, right? So in any startup, one of the big things in the early stages is figuring out your market fit and what services and products you should provide. So we came out of the steering committee with a mandate to sort of look at businesses that had minimum of, or traction $1 million in sales, 3 employees, and investment of 250. I think now that we're out here and seeing, like, we wanted to set up a little bit better now before we go out really and promote, which is what we'll start doing. But my sense is that I'm not sure we'll hit that as much as we'll get So our goal is also to get businesses that have the market potential of have traction necessarily yet, or haven't reached some of those goals. They may have like a certain amount of seed funding, but if we look at their market they're going after, it could be anywhere from $100 to a $500 million market. One of the businesses that we just took on recently is a SaaS-based model for emergency training services, and it's digitizing things that are typically paper right now. And so we feel really confident about that. There's some struggles, gaps that they have, so we're finding that the access to funding is something that we could help them with. So there's an example there. But most of the businesses we're looking at, it doesn't necessarily have to be just technology, it could be innovation. So food is becoming, food is a very hot area right now in terms of innovation. So food-related products we would look at. SaaS-based models are really strong. So there's a whole bunch of areas that, and I think with our network too, like I was thinking the other day that I could have a meeting and I could have a presentation and have like $20 billion worth of valuation that's been created by people in this area. Like it's a really deep area of companies that are becoming world-renowned. So.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks for your assistance in all of this.
Is there anyone else around the table that would? Okay. So seeing none, thank you again for being here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And we look forward to a future report coming back from staff specific to the request. Great, thank you. So item 4.2 on our agenda tonight is the 2021 audited financial statements, and representing Baker Tilly, who will present, is Jay Anstey. So come on forward, Jay. And the floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Jay Anstey. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly. I'm here tonight for Sue Bragg, who you're mostly more familiar with. She could not make it due to a scheduling conflict, but I think I know most faces around the council chambers here, but although I haven't been here for this term of council, I'm usually working in the background during our audit process. As mentioned, we are here tonight to present the audit results and the draft financial statements of the 2021 fiscal year for the municipality. We are presenting draft consolidated financial report for approval. Does someone have the, thank you. They are consolidated financial statements, a financial report, because it does include the library and the BIA boards, which are separate boards, but the results are included with the financial report that is included with tonight's agenda package. The audit report in the financial statements is dated today, June 6, and as they are in draft form until approved, hopefully at the end of this meeting. It is an unqualified audit opinion. That means that the financial statements are presented within public sector accounting standards within all material respects. One item to note is there was a restatement of the 2020 and prior year figures, which I will get into later in the financial presentation tonight. But regardless of that, it still was a clean, unqualified result, and a clean management letter will be issued as well, with forthcoming after this presentation. Looking at the audit procedures, just as a brief overview to get some understanding to council and to the public of what we do during our audit, you can break it down into two basic timelines and sections. The first is in the fall, where we come in and do we call it the interim audit, where we look at the processes and procedures of the municipality. We break these down into testing cycles, where there's a revenue cycle and we test the revenue and related collections of that revenue, an expenditure cycle where we test those cycles and specific streams within those cycles as well. We review minutes and bylaws during the interim phase of our testing, as well as the investment and IT areas that could impact the financial results of the municipality. At year end, we come in and then turn our focus to the financial results, where we actually scrutinize the balances as of December 31st and the results throughout the year. We compare to third-party evidence, we compare to budget and actual prior years, and analyze for reasonability. We also then take those scrutinized figures and ensure that they were put into the financial report that is presented tonight, and that all of the required disclosures are included as well. Looking at the consolidated statement of operations for the 2021 fiscal year, you have in front of you the excerpts with some subtotals at a high level, and starting with operating revenues of $60 million for the 2021 year. This was $1.6 million over budget, actually very much in line with budget. Some small items, including some grant funding throughout 2021, mainly COVID funding and the Safe Restart that was unbudgeted for, but largely operating revenues were in line with budget for the year. Operating expenses of $58 million. Comparing this to budget of $49 million, it appears to be $8 million over budget, but one very important item is to note is that included in the $58 million is amortization expense of $11 million, and this is a non-cash item, an accounting entry for the amortization of capital assets over their useful life. So in reality, excluding the unbudgeted amortization expense, expenses were actually $47 million or $3.2 million under budget. The main reason for them being under budget, while there are variances throughout the year as operations do change, one of the areas was recreation, and as a result of lockdowns, you did see some reduction in recreation expenses as some of those operations didn't occur throughout the 2021 year. Looking at capital and other revenues of $9.1 million, this compared to a budget of $20.2 million. It appears to be a very unfavorable budget, but it's important to note that the capital revenue items are for items that tend to occur over several years. A good example of this was $3 million was budgeted for the expansion of the water treatment plant, but only $93,000 in actual expenditures were incurred during the 2021 fiscal year, and we anticipate them occurring in a future year. Included in capital and other revenues is $3 million for the assumption of the Mountain Croft subdivision. This was the fourth phase of assumption by the municipality. Overall, looking at an annual surplus of $11.6 million. And again, this does include the capital revenues and amortization expense. So many items that aren't related to one fiscal year in particular, but the $11.6 million is further explained in note 20. It's a very important note to the financial statements on the allocation of that annual surplus. And one item to note is $4.3 million was transferred to reserves at the end of the 2021 fiscal year as part of what you will see in, I believe there's a report coming from the treasurer tonight. Looking at financial activities, the revenues by their source, just as a percentage of where revenues come from on a percentage basis. And this shows the 2020 and 21 fiscal year for the town. And you don't see a lot of change year over year, as we generally don't see a lot of variance on where the funds come from. But 60% come from property tax, approximately 27.5% from user charges, and approximately 4% in each year from government grants. Comparing to surrounding municipalities, property taxes tend to range in the 59 to 63%. So the town is kind of in the middle of the range there. User charges are in the range of 24 to 27%. So Collingwood is one of the higher areas for user charge source of revenue. And then government grants range in the area of 2 to 6%. So again, Collingwood falling right in the middle of those. And recognizing that a 1% change in any of these sources represents about a $600,000 change in revenue source. Looking next at the expenses, and this shows the percentage of expenses by department, and the largest expenses area being protection services at 22%, environment at 22%, transportation at 17%, and so on. Again, two areas to look at are the protection area. Collingwood at 22% is on the low end of the range of surrounding municipalities. It ranges kind of 22 to 29%. And then the environmental spend, Collingwood is actually on the high end of the range of surrounding municipalities from 20 to 23%. One final look at expenses, but from a different point of view. And the last one showed them by department. This is by the nature of expense. So where they spent by nature, the main area is on salaries and benefits, just shy of 40%. Materials and services sitting at just shy of 20%, and contracted services around 17%. Moving on to the statement of financial position as of December 31st, 2021. Starting with financial assets, the total as of December 31st, 2021 was $142 million of financial assets. Financial assets are those that are either cash or going to be converted to cash. The $142 million is a $17 million increase year over year. The main increase there is, you'll see, is in investments, and that is simply a transfer of cash that has been moved into investments to earn a return on the available funds. The increases also come from the collection of taxes receivable and the collection of long-term receivables. When looking at cash as a percentage of current liabilities, there's a provincial indicator on what low risk would be considered, and as long as you have enough cash to cover 50% of your current liabilities, the province would consider you to be a low risk municipality. Town of Collingwood can cover the current liabilities by 1.35 times, so a significant amount of cash on hand and investments as well. Looking at taxes receivable briefly, I'm just an interesting note here on taxes receivable, an ending balance of $2.6 million as of the end of 2021, one of the lowest balances we've actually seen in surrounding municipalities in a number of years, and Town of Collingwood, as you'll see in this graph, is the lowest of surrounding municipalities and below the provincial average. And that would indicate that between Treasury having a collection process in place and the ability of ratepayers to pay taxes, the collections are strong of taxes receivable. So an interesting stat in a COVID year, but less good collections by Treasury. Looking at the liability side of the statement of financial position, total liabilities of $97.5 million at the end of 2021. An $8.7 million increase in liabilities year over year. The sole source for this, the real source, is the increase in obligatory reserve funds, and again, those are the development charges and government grants that have been collected but not yet spent. So again, one of the reasons that we saw cash increase on the financial assets. Otherwise, liabilities are really in line with the previous year, and there was no new long-term debt taken throughout the year, just regular repayments. Looking a little bit deeper at the deferred revenue and the obligatory reserve funds, $50 million at the end of 2021. The $11 million that I referred to previously was the $15 million that was collected throughout the year, mainly in development charges from some of the major subdivision developments that are going in, offset by $4 million of obligatory reserve funds used throughout the year. And this brings us down to our net financial assets. So if you look at this in an extreme way, if the town collected everything that was owed to it and paid off all the liabilities, at the end of the day, there would still be $45 million left available to the town. So a very, very strong, high net financial asset balance. The province would consider a municipality to be low risk as long as they had, if there is net financial assets and not net debt, then you're in a strong position. And this is one of the highest positions that I've seen in a number of years in any of the municipalities that we work with. And then moving into the non-financial asset side of the statement of financial position, and this is mainly made up of the tangible capital assets of $222 million at the end of 2021. And this is the cost of the assets purchased less the amortization that I have referred to previously. Throughout the year, there was a $3.3 million net increase, and this is from $14 million of additions to capital assets, offset by the $11 million of amortization expense that I referred to previously. Some of the examples of increases through the year were the assumption of the Mountain Croft subdivision that I referred to, the Fisher Field Clubhouse that I understand has been completed, Sunset Point Playground, the beginning of that progress, fire pumper trucks, sidewalk plows, and so on. chart in front of us shows the asset consumption of tangible capital assets and really how much of the remaining life of the assets has been used and how much is left. So Collingwood has, on average, 42% of its assets useful life has been used and 68% remaining. Ideally, to be below at a low risk category, you want to have assets under 50% used. So Collingwood is in that low range. And if we look at a little bit deeper dive on that by asset type, we see that most of the areas are under 50% by type of asset, except for the machinery and equipment, that is at 60%. So an area to look at for asset replacement. And of course, it takes a deeper dive into looking at which assets are more fully amortized and which have less useful life remaining. One thing to note with the town of Collingwood is that there has been a life cycle replacement reserve fund established, and at the end of 2021, it did sit at $6.3 million. So there is a plan in place for the replacement of assets as they do age. Finally, looking at accumulated surplus of $268 million. Usually, I do like to say that this amount is not cash and investments. It's mainly made up generally of tangible capital assets, though the $66 million reserve and reserve fund balance does make up 25% of the accumulated surplus. So again, one of the higher amounts of reserves and reserve funds, and there's cash and investments to back that up. As I mentioned, $126 million combined of cash and investments, even though some of this is restricted in use for those obligatory reserve funds for the use of development charges and government grants. $31 million of the reserves and reserve funds are earmarked for the water and wastewater reserves. And again, looking at whether the province would consider something high or low risk, if the reserve balance was at least 20% of the operating expenses for the year, then you would be low risk. The reserve balance for the town is 114% of operating expenditures, so a very high reserve balance. But of course, some of that is set aside for the capital that I mentioned. And there is specifically a $4.2 million current purposes reserve set aside. So 10% is specifically set aside for current purposes, while some of the reserves are for capital, a good chunk of them at least. And you'll also notice the $8 million that says current fund surplus. This is really the it's not a surplus, it's an accumulated deficit, and then that's the setting up the liability for the potential remediation of the Collingwood terminals. And there is a note that goes along with that in the financial statement. So looking at some of the important notes to highlight, if you are reading the statements, these ones are important to consider. One of those being that liability, and that it's a contingent liability, meaning there's no cost that has been entered into, but given some opinions and ranges, the low end has been set up at $8 million to account for future spend on this site. Note 18 is the COVID-19 note. You'll see this note in any audited financial statements, but COVID-19 obviously has an impact on any organization's financial position and finances over the past 2 years. So that note does disclose some of the financial impacts of COVID-19. Note 19 is the disclosure of the restated financial statement. The restatement during the year was related to the new Tecumseh water agreement. During the process for the renegotiating and re-signing the new deal, it was discovered that some of the formulas were not applied correctly in the previous agreement. So there was a $942,000 restatement of prior years. This is set up as a liability on the financial statement as of the end of 2021. And has also come through the accumulated surplus and related out of the reserves from the water and wastewater reserve. And lastly, note 21, and this is a note regarding a commitment for the new water treatment plant. And while there's no official signed agreement for a commitment, we felt with management that it was important to disclose that there is a significant capital expenditure forthcoming, and that it could significantly impact the financial status of the organization, especially compared to the financial statements as I presented tonight, compared to the status over the next 3 to 5 years. The highlights I want to go over for the night. I'm happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anstey. Jay, I appreciate you being here on behalf of Baker Tilly and giving the presentation. I'm going to, if you like, you've just gone through a very thorough report, and if you want to take a seat just for a moment, but I'd ask you to stay. And we're going to move from our deputations into staff reports. And I'm going to table that we received the financial statement, and then I'm going to turn to our clerk for some additional information. Then we'll open it up to the public for a comment, and then we'll return to committee to table any questions of yourself or of staff based on what we've received tonight. So, but thank you again. So, okay,
Acting Mayor.
great. So following along with what I just said, if we could, we're going to move to our staff reports. We've got the 5.1, and going to break it into the two so that the first part is that staff report T 2022-04, 2021 audited financial statements be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that? I've got Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. Are there any questions in terms of receiving the report tonight? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So I'm now going to ask our treasurer if she would add comment to what has been presented, and then we'll open it to the public for questions.
Thank you, and through you, Acting Mayor Hall. And thank you to Mr. Anstey for that thorough presentation and for taking one for Sue Bragg tonight. We appreciate that. So I think Mr. Anstey's covered pretty much everything, but I wanted to add just a few pieces of information when it comes to the annual surplus, because I think oftentimes our eyes draw to what that total amount is listed on the Consolidated Statement of Operations. So if you look at page 5 of our financial statements, you'll see that the annual surplus that Mr. Anstey spoke to was $11.6 million. And what I want to really specify or highlight is that this is an annual surplus according to PSAB statements, meaning this includes all of the capital assets and amortization and all the things that we do as a town from a capital standpoint, but is not truly the amount of annual surplus that was recorded or transferred to reserves at the end of the year. So I've broken that down within the report just to give sort of clarity and understanding to what that number means. So in total, for the end of 2021, the annual surplus that we transferred to reserves was a net amount of just over $2 million. We do have a surplus management policy that's been included as part of this report. And we follow that in order to transfer those funds or that amount to the reserves as applied in that policy. And I'll first say that the first part of it was transferred to a capital deficit that's been there for several years. And you can see from 2019 to 2021, we were at 1.9 million back in 2019. And as at the beginning of 2022, that capital deficit is now fully paid for or accounted for. So we're glad to have that put aside. The second piece of the surplus went towards the operating contingency reserve. And our policy states we are to bring that up by to 1% of the following year's taxation. So we are in line with our policy with respect to that as well, and that brought the balance to, $380,000. And then the next step is the amount that was transferred to capital contingency reserve. We transferred over $900,000 to that reserve fund. And again, the target balance for that was $1.5 million, and we've achieved that with this annual surplus transfer. And finally, the remaining amount of $465,000 was transferred to our life cycle reserve fund. And I think as Mr. Anstey had mentioned earlier, he talked about having this life cycle reserve fund and how important it is in terms of the amount of assets we have and the consumption ratios that we had presented. And of course, as members of council know, we've presented quite a bit of information in our AMP or our asset management plan in the last few months. So I think we're on a healthy start towards the amounts that we need, and it's nice to be able to have just that little bit extra to be able to transfer at the end of this year. So I just wanted to wrap up to share that information because I think it's very important that we distinguish between what the accumulated surplus or the annual surplus is under PSAB's financial statements and what truly the net amount is that we transfer to reserves at the end of each year. So thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Quinlan, and appreciate the fact that you're here tonight in person and in the acting capacity of CAO. So thank you for being with us tonight. I'm going to now turn to your right and ask the clerk if we have anybody either in the public gallery or online who would like to speak to this presentation, the staff report specifically.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. I actually can't see the full audience, so if there's anybody in the gallery that wishes to speak, please let the Acting Mayor know. And anybody participating online, if you'd like to address the staff report and the financial statements, either to our treasurer or to our auditors this evening, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And there's no one at this time, Acting Mayor Hall.
So if there's no one from the public that would like to speak to this, then I will return to committee. And so we've had the deputation from Mr. Anstey, and then we've had follow-up comment from our treasurer. Does anybody have a question for clarification or comment they'd like to make tonight? Councillor Jeffrey, and then I've got Councillor Hamlin, and then I've got Councillor Doherty. Councillor Jeffrey, go ahead.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, you know, I think for the public it can be confusing, and I think our acting CEO did address it in part this evening, but we seem to have very different conversations at different parts of the year. And these are really great financial statements, yet when we go into a budget discussion, we're penny pinching and we feel like we're in dire straits and we have no choices. And so I guess in my mind, and I'm a taxpayer and a resident, I'm trying to link those conversations and why they're so different when we're a cash flush municipality by the looks of things here. And I know we put ourselves in a great position under CAO John Brown and the decisions he helped council with in making some really good decisions on how we didn't increase our debt and we reduced our debt, and we've made all those great decisions. But I just find we have all these different conversations. So that's one question. And maybe just a comment because maybe there is no answer. And the other one was under Jay's great presentation, under the operating expenses, we talked about the comparison of the 2021 budget to the 2021 actual and the explanation of the amortization. But we didn't talk about the comparison. I was just curious about the 2020 expenses, what we would be deducting out of there that was amortization, and how those two operating years compare. And is there any sense to talking about the comparison of the cash expenses versus the non-cash expenses in separate line items as opposed to in bulk, and then trying to explain the difference separate from the other. And I guess the only other thought in my mind, and it'll be for going forward, but I know a couple of times I've presented the opportunity, and I was speaking with some of my BC colleagues about it again, and the ability of a municipality to defer taxes for seniors and struggling families. You collect them eventually, but the challenge has always been that we don't have the cash flow to carry such a program. Yet I see here that we are in an excellent cash position, and so I would maybe go forward, wonder why that couldn't be considered or wouldn't be possible. So those are the kinds of things that came to my mind tonight while I was hearing the financial statements. So thank you. Great
thank
statements and great presentation. Thank you.
Okay. So if I may, I'll direct the questions to yourself, and then if appropriate, if you would like to refer them, that would be appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
That sounds great. Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall, and through you to Councillor Jeffrey. I think I'll tackle the easy one first, the comparison of the 2020 operational expenses and what we would take out. Very similar. It's about 10.5 million in amortization for the 2020 amounts, which would be darn close, I think, to about the 47 million that that Mr. Anstey, referred to as the operating expenses for 2021 as well. And I think when we talk about that, so it's a pretty big question to say, during budget we're talking about trying to pinch pennies and save, and I think probably the biggest thing that I'll lean on is the fact that we have over $200 million worth of assets on hand that we have to maintain and replace and take care of over the next, so many years. And I think a lot of our cash, or I don't want to say, I'd say almost not quite half, but 50 some odd million dollars is made up of funds that are specific to development charge reserve funds. And then there is some money in there as well that's federal gas tax and OSIF related. Now, there is parameters around how we can spend that. Not so much with federal gas tax and OSIF in the sense that, we would apply that to asset management as well, and some new as too. But I think when it comes to the development charges specifically, as you know, that's not cash for the town to spend unless it's for a specific growth program, which then adds to the assets that will accumulate as well and bring up the total value. So when we're trying to, be cognizant or careful at budget time, I think we do use our reserves to a certain extent quite a bit. In fact, a majority of our capital program is funded through the reserve plan or reserve funds. But I also think when we're looking at it, what we're trying to keep in the back of our minds is the fact that all of these assets will essentially need to be replaced, as you know, and as I know members of council know as well. And maintaining those reserves, and I would say more specifically the life cycle reserve especially, is extremely important in that we have to have the funds there at some point, because when the growth, and I mean, I'm not saying it's going to end tomorrow or the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but when that growth does slow down or changes, they will have built all of these things that come along with growth, but then, here we are holding the bag, having to maintain and replace and replenish those assets at some point. So while I can understand there's a dichotomy and a little bit can be, I suppose, a little bit of confusion, I think it's really, really related to that going back in history, or going forward in the future, my apologies, to those assets that we need to maintain. And I don't know, Mr. Anstey, did you any other? I think it's difficult for you to answer that question, really, but I think that's all I have. And sorry, did I miss one, Councillor Jeffrey? I thought.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Well, it was just the comment in terms of being in a cash position to facilitate some kind of tax deferral program similar to the municipalities in BC who help seniors and challenge young families. Then we still collect the taxes if there's some disposition of the property. But it does require some kind of cash flow while those amounts remain outstanding. Although I understand many seniors just really aren't interested in that because they've always paid their bills and they don't like not to pay their bills. But it's a very successful program in British Columbia, and I'm just curious why in such times we wouldn't try to help out with the same kind of formulas and things here. So, yep.
Okay, sorry. So I missed that one, Acting Mayor. Oh, can I respond?
Please.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I think that's something that we could look at because, as you've noted, we are in a favorable cash position. I think one thing I'll go back to is that our collections are quite good. In fact, better than the provincial average, probably lower than most municipalities around here. So an affordability situation doesn't seem to be an issue at this point. But I think you're right. At some point, it might be something that we should look at, and we could do so as staff.
Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. Are you now Mr. Mayor?
I am just the chair for tonight.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Mr. Ainsley for the audited report tonight, and it was such a pleasure as a representative of the community to hear such positive financial news. I was quite taken aback when I poured through the financial statements, and I loved hearing what he had to say, and I wrote down some things. We have lots of cash and investments on hand to cover liabilities. He mentioned the word low risk twice. He said we have a very high net financial asset balance, the highest of any municipality he had seen. And I just want to say thank you to our staff and to council. I think we have had tremendous stewardship and obviously good fortune shone on us over this past year. I do have a few questions. My first one is, I'm sort of following up on the same question, but maybe in a little different way that Councillor Jeffrey raised. And that's this question of amortization that throws out the difference between the budgeted expenses, which were 49 million, and the actual expenses, which were 58 million. And I believe I heard that the main difference there was the amortization. And I'm just wondering if there's a different way to reflect this in our budget numbers, so it's not looking like it needs an explanation when it comes to us. And my second question is, the cash flow statement that was included in the financial statements also includes non-cash items like amortization and capital this and that. And I was wondering if it's possible to create what I would call a more traditional cash flow statement for the viewing of our public and council, where we can have a look at exactly how the cash flow went in a particular year, and perhaps it would even show us how we get to that 2 million actual surplus that we have. And my last question is, I noticed there was an increase in the expenses under the environment category from 9.3 to 13.3. And I didn't understand what that related to, so I was hoping that perhaps our treasurer could address that. Thank you very much.
Through you, Acting Mayor Hall, to Councillor Hamlin. To go to the amortization piece, to start with that first, in general, and we're not, we're definitely, there are some municipalities that do budget for amortization. We just don't, in fact, because it's not funded through taxes, of course, and that's the reason why you'll always see that there. I suppose, you know, from an actual budget standpoint, we could include it, and then we'd have to do some entries to back it out. So it just makes it a little bit more difficult. And I don't think it necessarily adds as much value, although Mr. Anstey might have a little bit of a different opinion, so I'll ask him to come, and speak to that. But it's not representative. It's not like a private business or a normal corporation that would budget for their amortization, because as things go and they pay their taxes, those it affects their bottom line. So I can certainly understand why you would say that, but I would say for now I'd prefer to keep it out of the budget until we get to a stage where we're maybe a little bit more mature in the way we actually budget. Your second question on the cash flow statement. So the cash flow statement actually walks us from the annual surplus on the consolidated statement of operations to the actual cash balance. So in order to do that reconciliation, you have to take into consideration some non-cash items to back them out or add them in, depending on which way they go from the financial statements. I think, and this one I will ask Mr. Anstey to come and speak to, but I say from our standpoint, it's a reconciliation, and it's a confirmation of what that cash balance is. And it's also a confirmation of that our consolidated statement of operations is correct, as well as our net financial position. So that is the reason why it's formatted the way it is. I think I understand from your standpoint, a normal cash flow statement, or for a regular business, it generally still looks at the non-cash items, but it keeps it down below or below the line is what we generally would say. It's just a little bit different in this situation because we're reconciling between that cash flow, the financial assets, and then what the income statement says as well. And your final question, and I thought I had it in my head, and now it's just gone. I'm sorry.
Thank you. It was about the increase in what was budgeted for expenses for environment, which was 9.3, and I believe it came out to 13.3.
And I may have to get back to you on that. I don't actually recall. I do know. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am going to have to get back to you on that because it's not sticking out unless Mr. Anstey might have something there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'll start with the last one, which actually relates to the amortization, but so it is a result of the amortization of $3.8 million being included in that actual compared to the budget. So we're right back into that first question, that you back out amortization and you're more in line there on the environmental. Speaking to Acting CAO's comments through you, Chair, on the amortization expense, it really is exactly as Acting CAO Quinlan did say. It's a difference between this year-end report for amortization expense, whether it's included in the budget. You could pass it as a council and have it included in the budget. And this report is more clear, in my opinion. I like to have it in there. But then throughout your fiscal year, then you're having the Treasury staff go through and back it out all the time in all the reports. So it's kind of, I understand that this is the audited final report, but it's a one-time report versus doing it through the years. So it is at the discretion of management and council. So it's at one point or another, it's going to have to confuse someone. If I had my way, I'd have it down and included with the capital revenue, but unfortunately under the public sector reporting standards, you have to have it included in the operating expenses as opposed to some type of capital expenditure. It would make much more sense to me. I tend to agree. And in terms of the cash flow question, yes, that is just a reconciliation of the confirmation of the statement of operations. I've never seen the other method of cash flow. It's called the direct method, where it tends to take each source of cash and list it out in the cash flow statement. But one, and I don't know if this was your intention, but you had mentioned the reconciliation of cash to the surplus. Those two will always be different, the actual surplus and the cash. Those are two different things. And again, note 20 is more of the reconciliation of the surplus of the statement of operations to the surplus that was transferred to reserves at the end of the year.
Just a very brief follow-up. I was reading after I looked at the financial statements at the public accounting standards, and because I was looking to see if the cash flow statement we had was, anyway, if we could get more detail, and it referenced there were two other statements that would have had to have been done. So I'm going to send that information, if I can, to our acting CAO, and she can just have a look at it and see, because it's just hard to sit here and see how all the monies were spent when you have things in the statement that aren't cash. So anyway, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Chair. My colleagues here have asked a couple of the questions that I had, and I've received good answers. I also do want to echo their comments about how satisfying it is to see financial statements like these and know that we as a municipality are in pretty good shape. I know Councillor Jeffrey is well aware when we attend Association of Municipalities of Ontario or FCM conferences, and we talk to other municipalities where their tax revenue is falling, their populations are declining, they have 35 bridges that are in bad shape that they have to repair. It makes you feel really good that we are in this position. And, I recall getting on this council in 2014, and there were several areas where we had cause for concern, just in terms of our ratios and the policies that we put in place at that time, although they were a little painful, we're certainly starting to see the payback on all of those. Not to say we rest on our laurels in any way, but it just goes to show that if you strike a course and stay the course, that you will see results. I'll just also just add a quick follow-up to Councillor Jeffrey's comments about the notion of introducing a potential tax deferral program for certain segments of our population. And I'm wondering if I could add to that as a tactic to make housing more affordable for certain demographics if we have a tax deferral in place. Don't need an answer now, but I'm just going to put it out there because taxes can be a significant monthly expense, as we all know. And then finally, I was wondering if either our treasurer or Mr. Anstey could walk me through the restatement, that's note 19, with regard to the reconciliation of the New Tech Water Agreement, because I was just confused as to whose payables and whose liabilities I was looking at in this bank of numbers here.
I'll look to our acting CAO, and then if you would like to refer, please.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. Yeah, I think I'll take that question. So it was a payable, through you to Councillor Doherty, it was a payable on behalf of the town of Collingwood to the town of New Tecumseth. The agreement that was in place from 2000 to 2020 included some wording around the fact that the rates that New Tecumseth paid to the town of Collingwood would be on a cost recovery basis, and that an annual reconciliation would occur, meaning that each year, at the end of the year, we would say, here's how much it cost us to do, to treat the water, to send it to you, to do any capital works or any engineering, anything that gets along the lines of water treatment. And here's what you paid to us. And the net difference was that they paid us more than their proportionate share. And we had to refund them that amount. Now, that reconciliation hadn't occurred. And so we went back to 2016 up into including 2020. And the net amount was that $942,000 that was payable to New Tech. When we first, came across it, we had discussions with the auditors as well to say, are we in a restatement situation? And I think very wisely, our auditors led us down that path, and I think it was an important thing to do. It makes it, a little bit more complicated to explain, of course, but in the act of transparency, I think it just made sense. So I hope that explains it a little bit better for you. I know it's very difficult to relay the information sometimes in words.
Thank you. And I won't say that I'm your best subject for understanding financials anyway. Just one final comment, actually. So in this budget, in this audit, you did refer to the fact that the change in our expenses, like quite a large increase, was because we added amortization in versus 2020. So will we be doing that on a go forward so that, i.e. our expenses, when we reflect them for 2021, will include amortization, and we will compare them to 2022 that also include amortization?
So you're looking directly at Mr. Anstey. Please, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. And I apologize if I misspoke. So Amortization is included in both the 2020 and 2021 actual figures. Where I was referring to, it's in the 2021 actual figures, but not the 2021 budget. So 2020
Okay.
had amortization of 10.5 million, I believe. 2021 had amortization expense of 11 million. So we do see that number increase as additional assets are added on and newer assets. But it is in both years' actuals, and it
Okay.
will continue to be in the actuals. The question, I think, that has been posed is, will it be included in the budget in go-forward years so that you can make the budget comparable to actuals?
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood. That's great. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Great. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Chair Hull. Jay, nice to see you on a business level. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I just want to speak to both reports. I find these quite good news. I think at the start of this term, and even going back to the last one, as Councillor Doherty said, we had to make a lot of decisions that we didn't want to, and I think some of our penny pinching has paid off, and it's left us in a better situation. And I think this speaks to the strength and the resolve of our staff. I think having actually the best staff that we can possibly have, that can educate us and push us through to this, when there's we've just come off 2 years where many communities in Ontario and the world are struggling, and once again they've kept our nose above water, but well above our nose. We're swimming quite viciously against the current. So this is for staff. They bring us these initiatives. We vote on it, and I thank you. I see this as massively positive. And if we continue with this, we're going to be in a much better position in the next 5 to 10 years, and we're giving the next council quite a head start. So the first council that Deb and I and Kathy came on to was quite different. And I think the next council will have a heads up, and thank you very much for that. It comes to our decisions around the table, but it starts with staff and it ends with staff. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for those kind words. Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod.
Yeah, just two little questions. One of which is regarding the pie charts. I do love me a good pie chart. Where it states that our interest, as expressed as a proportion of our expenses, is 1.8%, down from 2.1, and I'm just relating that back to our lower debt situation. Is that the case? It's in the presentation rather than in the actual report.
If I may, sorry, through you, Acting Mayor Hall, I'm just bringing it up. So the interest charge, yes, that would just be the decrease in the amount that we're paying towards our debentures each year. So slowly the interest amount comes
Right.
down. You're
So
right.
the lowering of the debt pays off in more ways than one because of the lowered interest rates as well. Thank you.
Sure.
And the second one the second question I wanted to ask, and it's actually not related to this, but regarding this deferred tax business that has been raised today, which I think is a great idea. But I do know that we did do a deferral of taxes during the height of the crisis of COVID in 2020. Can you remember off the top of your head what kind of uptake there was on that program at the time through the chair?
If I may, through the chair, to Councillor McLeod. To be honest, there wasn't, you didn't have to apply to it. We just automatically withheld interest charges being pushed through for, I believe in 2020, it was the full year. In 2021, we offered that up until the end of May. So in terms of the cost of the municipality, to be honest, I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but it wasn't extremely substantial. And again, it goes back to the fact that the taxes receivable itself is quite low. So the accumulated interest doesn't impact that greatly when we push those things out. But certainly, I think taxpayers and residents alike appreciated it, and it allowed them the opportunity to come back and do the things that they needed to do and pay it at their pace throughout the pandemic.
Thank you. That's it.
Councillor Jeffrey, did you have a comment to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, just a quick comment. I remember former Treasurer Marjorie Leonard reporting, because I'd asked specifically because staff were really worried about if it was a major uptake, how much time it was going to take. But I think in the end it was about 56 households took advantage of it. So I don't think it was something really substantial. I don't know what numbers those would account for, but I still think, if there's people that need help, we should be helping them. And if we have the cash flow to do it, then we should. Anyway, that was my recollection.
I would, if I could just piggyback on that, I would agree. There were a number of things actually that came out of the mayor at the time task force related to COVID, and we were looking at sort of worst case scenarios. And on a positive note, many of those things never came to fruition specific to Collingwood. So it was positive. Before we carry forward, any other questions, comments around the table? Okay, so seeing none, before I table the report then, Mr. Anstey, thank you very much for being with us this evening. Thank you for your detailed presentation, and good to go. I just have a very brief comment, and that is it's been referred to on a couple of occasions. Councillor Jeffrey, you specifically referenced CAO Brown at the time, and it is a collective effort. So between CAO Brown, CAO Amin, our current CAO in Sonia Skinner, the three of them have worked with 2 consecutive councils, and I think starting in 2014, the work, the heavy lifting that was done in the early years and carried forward by this council is something that we can be proud of. And of course, we owe a debt to, no pun intended, to our Treasury and to our Treasurer in particular, both our former in Treasurer Leonard and our current in our acting CAO this evening, Treasurer Quinlan, for the work that they've done and through their department. I think it is a good news story. It's one that we should be promoting to the community so that they are aware of the financial snapshot. At the end of the day, they are the shareholders of the community, and they should be aware of the current state. So again, it's a collective effort, and I applaud all of those from 2014 to 2018, and those currently around the table and within the ranks for the hard work. So thank you. So that said, I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder that the 2021 audited financial statements be hereby approved, and that would be T 2022-04, 2021 audited financial statements. That was the report itself. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Madigan and our acting deputy mayor McLeod. And are there any final questions, comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, those in the affirmative, and it carries unanimously. Thank you. So from there, we will move from our staff reports to section 6 of the agenda, which is our departmental update or updates and discussions. And we have 2 tonight. Both of them are for Director Valentine to speak to. And before I do so, I just wanted to mention to anyone who is within the gallery or perhaps following along at home, unlike our staff reports where there's maybe a direction and an opportunity for public to give comment, there isn't an opportunity specifically in this section of the agenda. However, looking at the first item, for example, Huntington Wood Trails, there may be some people with some comment or opinion that they would like to share. And if they wish to do so, please stick around. You can have your 5 minutes at the end of the meeting under section 8, which is public delegations. So that said, if we could have Director Valentine, and you're with us, thank you. And I have to say, just for those, finally, last Tuesday, I had the opportunity to actually meet Director Valentine in person. It was a pleasure, as opposed to the box that I'm looking at here this evening. So it's good to have you here tonight. So you've got, the first one is the OLT appeal updates, Huntingwood Trails West. And then the second one is 6.2, and that's the Housing Development Specialist and Master Plan update. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to those in the chamber and to those joining us virtually. And I can assure you that I am an actual human person, not just a box. So I've been really happy to meet a number of people. And now that the world is reopening again and we're having an opportunity to see each other face to face. So while we do have no additional appeals of note to bring to your attention since we last spoke to this committee, we do have updates, and it's actually on 3 OLT matters that are ongoing at the moment. Of course, the most pressing and important in terms of the public response that we typically get is the Huntingwood appeals, known as the Huntingwood Trails Land West. And just a quick reminder that those appeals were for a non-decision related to a plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment. This matter is longstanding. It's been under appeal since late 2019, and there's been a number of case management conferences over the that time period that have been held by the Ontario Land Tribunal. Most recently, a case management conference was held on May the 9th, and the purpose of that conference was to provide an update to the tribunal on the matter and as well on the status of the town's interim control bylaw. There's a couple of documents that were produced for that hearing. One was an issues list and another is a procedural order should a hearing eventually be required on this matter. And both of those are public documents that are available for review. After the conference, the tribunal orders recognized that there is still a 5-week hearing scheduled for the beginning of August, but the tribunal member did note that there was a potential for the length of that hearing to be reduced if the issues were further scoped and if a settlement could be reached. So without prejudice, discussions do continue with the 3 remaining parties, and those are the appellant, who is the developer, the NVCA, our conservation authority, as well as the County of Simcoe. There was a residents group who was also a party to the appeal. They have withdrawn, but they remain keenly interested in the matter and have contacted staff on a number of occasions. So given the number of letters that council and staff continued to receive, we've had a number of requests for us to put together a publicly available backgrounder document. And we certainly also feel that that has value and have proceeded to produce the information. And it is to provide a history on the file as well as some general information on the Ontario Land Tribunal processes. And that is available to this council as well as the community through the link on today's agenda. Staff are very grateful to the number of community members that we talk to on a regular basis who will be helping us disseminate this product more widely to those who are interested. And as the chair mentioned, we do understand that there might be some members of the public here today who wish to speak to their concerns at the latter part of the meeting. And I just wanted to assure everyone that staff are already keenly aware of the various objections that the community and the residents that live nearby do have with respect to this development proposal, but we're always happy to listen should more information be brought forward. And as a reminder, given that this is an open session and this is ongoing litigation, we would be limited to speaking to process and background information only. Mr. Chair, would you like me to pause here if there's any questions or move forward with the other 2 OLT updates that we have?
If it's okay, maybe we'll take a pause after each, if that's appropriate. You're okay with that?
Absolutely fine.
That's kind of silly, seeing as you're the one that prompted. Thank you for the opportunity. Is there anyone from around the table that would like to pose a question specific to that update? I don't see any, so please, number 2 then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So the second update is on one of the town's newest appeals, and that's an appeal of a decision by the Committee of Adjustment to conditionally grant approval for a consent that is right next door to a development known as Blackmore Gates. And this consent to orient members of the public has frontage on here, Ontario Street between Finley Drive and Campbell Street. So this is a quite short update, Mr. Chair. In accordance with the town's procedures, a background report was recently presented in camera on May the 30th to council, where direction was provided to the town solicitor and staff. And as things evolve with this appeal, we'll likely have further updates. I'll pause here as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And given that we did have good discussion on the 30th, I'll open it up. But does anybody have a question, comment? Okay, I think we're good. So number 3 then.
Okay, moving on to the last update. We would like to advise council and the public that a settlement hearing was held on May 31st relating to the partial refusal of a heritage permit for painting of the masonry at 12 4th Street. And just a reminder to the public and anyone else who's interested that these types of hearings are open to the public. And should you ever wish to attend one, if you're interested in any of these matters, staff can help connect you with the appropriate Ontario Land Tribunal representatives so that you can observe these sessions. In this particular case, the tribunal member verbally accepted and endorsed the proposed settlement, which was supported by expert evidence from the town's community planner, and it was based on materials that were provided after the council decision was rendered on the heritage permit and that were subsequently peer reviewed by technical experts. So a written decision has not yet been rendered, and further updates will be provided through this forum when we do get a formal decision. However, the town is able to move forward to resolve the enforcement component on the basis of the verbal communication from the tribunal and in accordance with the settlement that was presented. And thank you, Mr. Chair. That was the third and final update from the OLT perspective.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Is there any question or comment specific to the third? Okay. Sorry about that. Councillor Doherty, did you want to grab some water? Please do. Go ahead. Okay.
I'll get it for you, Deb.
Okay. Director Valentine, if you want to move forward then, I guess, with 6.2, which is our housing development specialist and master plan update.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on February the 28th of this year, staff did provide a 3-month report back on the status of the recommendations from the town's Affordable Housing Task Force. And you might recall from that report, which was quite detailed, that there were 3 key action items that came out of the resolution. The first was to complete a recruitment process for a housing development specialist. The second was to retain a consultant to assist with an affordable housing master plan for the town. And the last was to reinitiate the Affordable Housing Task Force with a revised terms of reference, as well as an expanded membership. And their role primarily in the interim would be to assist with the development of that master plan process. So today we're here with updates on 3 matters, and although I was tagged with speaking to this update, we do have others on the call who can certainly assist in answering questions. With respect to the recruitment for the housing development specialist, unfortunately the town was not successful at attracting a qualified individual through the first round. However, we have reposted the position, and we are using different job boards this time that are more strategically focused on housing professionals. Previously, we had focused on job boards that were more towards the planning profession, but we would note that planners as well as related positions are extremely competitive in the market right now, but we do remain cautiously hopeful that we will get a better response from the reposting of the position. So without a dedicated resource in place and with a number of other priorities on the go, the current staff complement has not been able to advance the second recommendation, which was the retention of a consultant to complete the master plan. But we have been engaging in discussions around partnerships with surrounding municipalities and others. So in particular, we have the County of Simcoe, which now has an approved budget to undertake what they're calling a strategic plan for workforce or missing middle housing, which actually aligns very well with the demographic that the town's own proposed master plan is looking to address. The county is currently canvassing local municipalities to determine the level of interest for partnerships, if there's a potential for pooling of resources, ideas such as nested plans or other innovative suggestions that may help us put together a regional or sub-regional approach to affordable housing solutions. And of note, in those early discussions, our neighbor, Wasaga Beach, may also be proceeding with a plan for affordable housing and is engaging with us in discussions with the county. Staff have also met with representatives from the town of the Blue Mountains, as well as their nonprofit housing corporation, again, to explore partnerships, and some ideas included the expansion of the corporation into adjacent municipalities, the sharing of staff, and service agreements. So we certainly continue to explore partnership options and low-hanging fruit actions that could be accomplished while we continue to work through the recruitment process for a dedicated specialist. And this includes investigating an incentive program for accessory residential dwelling units. On the Affordable Housing Task Force front, which was the third major action coming out of the update report, the task force has met once since February, but continues to be very actively engaged in sharing materials and information, reports and studies with the town and acting as community champions. Staff are working with the Georgian Triangle Development Institute, and we're trying to gauge their interest in choosing one or two of their memberships to sit on the task force and provide that much needed development community insight. We're also working to appoint a member with lived experience and are following up with an individual who has expressed interest and was recommended to us as a positive addition to the task force. And lastly, we have action happening on appointing a local employer to the task force as well. And thanks to members of council who sit on the task force that have been assisting us on that front. So last but not least, the town is hosting a virtual housing workshop on June the 30th, and that is in partnership with the Urban Economy Forum. This would be a collaborative workshop which would examine a town-sized affordable housing challenge and explore options that municipalities, as well as businesses, advocates, and others, how they can take action to make real difference on the ground. What we mean by a town-sized issue is the event will be based on a scenario that will be provided from the town of Collingwood and based on the work that the Affordable Housing Task Force undertook, including some of the recommendations as well as the available funding envelope that we have. We hope to hear through this opportunity from housing practitioners, advocates, academics, and others about their reports, their experiences, and their recommendations. And we are looking for ideas from the minor through to the bold. And one of the key goals of this workshop is to bring together the many voices that we hear in our area around affordable housing matters. But it's not just the local voice that we hope to hear. The workshop also represents an opportunity to connect with what's known as the World Urban Pavilion. And that is a collaborative hub that was established for dialogue among national and global audiences on how municipalities can move forward with housing initiatives that are inclusive, accessible, affordable, and sustainable. So it's a really exciting opportunity. This event would also continue the town's preparation for the third Collingwood World Summit, which is being held in October, well, the 31st of October and the 1st of November of this year. And the theme of the summit overall will be housing and financing as a catalyst for achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So at the next Affordable Housing Task Force meeting, we'll be engaging with members about this upcoming housing workshop and open to hearing their ideas about how we can collectively maximize the potential of bringing together local, national, and international voices to learn about successes and challenges in affordable housing. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to provide the update. Myself and several others would be happy to answer questions if there are any at this time.
That's great. Thank you, Director Valentine, for the thorough update. There obviously are a lot of moving parts, specifically with regards to the first matter as it relates to finding a housing specialist. And I'm glad to hear that there's engagement with other municipalities about potentially some type of a collaborative solution. Questions, comments around the table? I see Councillor Jeffrey. Go ahead. And then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with respect to the housing specialist, I usually see our postings on the Twitter feed, and I apologize if I've missed it. I was wondering if this was one of those opportunities for us. I know that FCM is having some huge success in getting great talent through the remote working options. So on some of our files, if they don't need to be in Ottawa, we're hiring them out of Montreal, Toronto, sometimes out west, depending on the time changes and what the file is. Is this a position where we need them in-house, or is this one where we could try to pursue some talent remotely? I was just curious. Or are we requiring them to be in an office in our building for this one? Through to Director Valentine. Thank you.
Sure. Director Valentine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. So certainly this position would be eligible for remote work under the town's existing policies, whether that would be full remote work or hybrid. That would be to be discussed with the preferred candidate, but at this point, there would certainly not be an expectation to be attending the office on a daily basis. So we would remain flexible with candidates who wished to pursue the remote work options. I see Ms. McQuaig has put on her camera as well, so perhaps she has more to talk about on this front, but certainly we would be using the town's existing policies and procedures as a guideline in that regard.
Thank you. Manager McQuaid, did you want to add comment to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Director Valentine's comments. So yes, this position would be eligible for remote work. I would say, though, that the preference would be that it would be somebody living within the province of Ontario, because when it comes to remote work, when employees live in other provinces, then we have to be aware of the employment legislation governing a different province, which might complicate some matters. So certainly I'm not going to say it's out of the question, but I think from a corporate view, our preference would be to keep somebody that is residing and working within Ontario.
Okay. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to first congratulate our director on all the activity that's been going on. It had seemed to me quite quiet on the housing front. And to hear this update, I realized that the lack of a housing development specialist, although important, I'm sure, hasn't stopped the work from proceeding. I'm also very happy that staff are reaching out to the county and the surrounding municipalities on the affordable housing front. For sure, we share residents who work in each other's municipalities. People are traveling back and forth within a fairly small area. And if we can share costs and plans and all matter of things, I think it could be to the better on this particular topic. I'll just offer, knowing nothing at all about the human resources side of the municipality, I'll just offer up that a few people have mentioned to me that perhaps the salary that's being offered, at least as this appeared in the reports that we initially had on this, wasn't high enough to attract a planner. I did hear Director Valentine's comments that they were rephrasing the skill set for the job position, but I just offer up that thought as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. On this side of the table, is there anything? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Madigan.
Yeah, thank you. I actually agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Hamlin. I think it's tremendous that we're reaching out to our other communities. This is a regional problem, not just a Collingwood problem. And everybody that lives and plays within this region either lives at Blue and works in Collingwood, or so it's tremendous that we're looking forward. We could probably save some money that way. We can offer a little bit less, but when you have 3 or 4 communities working towards a common goal, they'll get a great planner that can come in and do a whole regional aspect to this, rather than just Collingwood is one. Simcoe County is all over the place, and they have a great resource, but I've been told by one of our Simcoe County reps that they might not have all the resources for it, so it's something that we definitely need within our community. So I would continue to push that. Please and thank you, which you already know. I love that you're saying yes, Bob, but you already know it. You don't need to write it down. I just think it's a great concept to look to our partners to the east and the west, and maybe even to the south, because opportunities for living within Clearview sometimes might be a little bit more accessible than the town of Collingwood and town of Blue Mountains. So great job. Thank you again, and continued success with moving forward.
Great. Thank you. Okay. If I don't see any other cards, then Director Valentine, thank you for the updates specific to 6.1 and 6.2. I appreciate it. Thank you. With that, then, we will move to item 7 on the agenda, which is other business. Is there anyone from around the table that has other business tonight? Okay. Seeing none, then, we move to item number 8, and that is the public delegation. Again, I'll look to my right and to the clerk and see if first anyone within the gallery and online would like to take an opportunity.
Thank you, Chair Hall. We do have, we have someone in the gallery that we're allowed to speak. We also have somebody online that we'll allow to speak following our public delegation here.
Perfect. Okay. Mr. Fryer, come on forward. And your 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Tim Fryer, 75 Georgian Manor Drive. Acting Mayor Hull and members of council and municipal staff. I had comments and interests come to mind when the agenda was released with the 2021 financial statements and some of the associated detail that was part of it. I didn't make comment the first opportunity today because I wanted to consider council input and incorporate anything applicable before addressing you. As discussed, the financial statements only provide summary detail, including county-related amounts. These will mostly be initial comments with more to follow in July. I'll just insert right here, I thank you directly to Treasurer Quinlan, Acting CEO Quinlan, for responding to my questions on Friday and Monday. Obviously very, very busy with your additional role, and I wasn't aware of that. So I appreciate your quick response and didn't get a chance to send an email back on that. As Treasurer Quinlan has noted to me, the corresponding report comparing year to year, year over year, will be provided by then. I comment that 2021 improves financial position to 45 million, which is 23% higher than 2020. Cash and investments is now 127 million compared to 107 million, so 20% higher. I think the report will help review those deltas, but it appears July is going to be a very heavy agenda. So I will now speak briefly to one particular aspect because of the timing of the release of this part of the 2021 financial detail. What stands out with the financial statements is the significantly reduced detail that is provided specifically relating to municipal water. Over the past few years, I have indicated to Council an ongoing interest in tracking financial and operational aspects for the department. It is from both the perspective of my work history, but also as I was the Council rep on the Collingwood Public Utilities Service Board when Council made the decision for dissolution. Since the supporting consultant's report indicated cost savings of approximately $700,000 annually, I try first to determine from the annual financial statement if this is being achieved. But once again, although it has been requested, there is not any detail like what was historically released to the public in the Collingwood Public Utilities Service Board annual business plan and financial report. Not only did that report provide detail on financial performance and operations comparatives too, but also new Tecumseh data. When I responded to Councillor Doherty's question during the first councillor open seat process, since I was one of the later interviewees, I decided to state that the official plan completion would be my one goal. My primary goal, though, in seeking the councillor role was centered on my ever-increasing interest about what's taken place with municipal water operations since the dissolution 7 years ago. The ICBL matter is one thing, but after being close back in 2015 to working out agreement with New Tecumseh, just prior to the dissolution, I decided to try again to become directly involved to help determine what has led Collingwood to this point. One can't determine it from the annual 2021 financial statement data after even reviewing the details. Again, I expressed interest last month in regards to the now for sure councillor vacancy for the same reasons. Your decision not to fill the seat, though, brings lame duck status into play, so that, in my opinion, that changes the dynamics for me. Hopefully next month's report can provide some more detail on water as well. I would submit that it is critically important that a review of water is included. With provincial regulation placing personal liability parameters on councillors in regards to municipal water operations, information should be available as members of the public are considering candidacy. For the new council, having to finalize agreement with New Tecumseh will be difficult enough with that municipality undergoing transition too. But I would submit that the first few years will likely be even more challenging as the plant expansion is now a projected $120 million investment. In my experience, those first 4 years of administrating the agreement are extremely difficult because that is when cost-sharing fine details are being instituted, not just in regards to capital investment, but operational expenses too. So in my opinion, council will no doubt be heavily involved. In closing off, I would just reference that the financial statements report, there is again a multi-million-dollar surplus for 2021, which, while certainly that outcome is better than a deficit, it still is a case of an indication of an excess of taxation. Further comment on that, though, will be more appropriate on once July's report and the FIR worksheets are available. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Fryer. Appreciate it. Clerk Almus, you indicated that there is an individual online that wishes to speak.
Certainly, again, those wishing to speak, please raise your hand. We do have an individual with the computer name, Sharon C.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing me time to speak this evening. My name is actually Julie Watney, and I am a resident of the Forest community. My property borders the proposed Huntingwood Trails development, and I am here with Sharon Carr to represent a community group called Friends of Silver Creek. Thank you, Director Valentine and your team for putting your backgrounder document together. It is very helpful for members of the community to understand where things are at in the development process and to have a document to refer to. Friends of Silver Creek, and also, we want to thank you for your transparency. Friends of Silver Creek Wetland now have 28,682 signatures opposing development of the Silver Creek wetland. We have major concerns in relation to the two developments, Huntingwood Trails and Bridgewater. We are concerned that both of these developments will not adequately address wetland conservation, flood mitigation, traffic concerns, endangered species protection, and preservation of the natural heritage of this area. To this end, could we please ask that all historical and current impact studies and reports associated with this file, environmental, flooding, traffic, and others, be made available and included online in one document? In addition, could a copy of any applications or amendments submitted by Huntingwood Trails or Bridgewater or any developers to the town of Collingwood also be made available in a one file online format? Finally, the Friends of Silver Creek would like to go on record in absolute opposition to any increase in densification to R3 zoning as per the zoning bylaw amendment put forth by Huntingwood Trails in files D11414211 and D120111. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, and I apologize. You referenced your colleague Sharon Carr was with you, but I did not get your full name. My
Julie,
apologies.
that's okay. Julie Watney.
Great, thank you, Julie.
I'm at
Appreciate you
11
being-
Forest Drive.
Perfect. So if I may just comment, thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for sticking through the first 2 hours to be able to participate. We hear you in the context that we've received the correspondence from your community, from the extended community who are concerned about the development. I will simply refer the request that you've made to our staff and what could potentially be deemed appropriate as it relates to public disclosure, perhaps something that we can undertake. And the reason I say that is just simply that, as you were made aware, as Director Valentine through her presentation made aware, given that the one matter in particular is in front of the OLT, there may be some things that just cannot be disclosed for one reason or the other. But if I may, our acting CAO, if we could do that as a takeaway tonight, that would be appreciated. And in terms of your comments specific to the developments, plural, and the objection of the zoning, your comments are noted. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're specifically interested in any impact studies that are in the public domain that we could reference going forward on both of those developments.
No, I fully appreciate that, and we'll certainly follow up with staff
Thank you.
specific to the request. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your consideration.
Clerk Almus, if I may, is there anyone else that would like an opportunity to speak tonight?
Not at this time, Chair Hall.
Okay, so with that, that then takes us from 8 to 9. And item number 9 would be our adjournment. And if I could go down my right-hand side to Councillor Jeffrey. You're putting forward a motion to adjourn? Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, and good night to everyone.